Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me. Welcome back. Also, welcome to those that are new to this vlog. I, on a weekly basis, nominate South African individuals or institutions for an award which I call Cupcake of the Week. If you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing. It really would mean a lot to my YouTube algorithm, and I would appreciate that. So, let's get started for this week. First nomination goes to General, or was it Major General? I think it's Major General Sinna. This esteemed gentleman this last week appeared before the Bitlanga Commission, and he did himself rather a disservice. Firstly, let's start with his credentials. He is the head of the KwaZulu-Natal section of the Hawks. The Hawks, for those of you who don't know, is a division of the South African Police Services that deal with serious crime as well as corruption. So a very high profile department. They used to be the Scorpions until our former president Jacob Zuma. When Mzumpi got stuck in and the Scorpions were captured and then turned into the Hawks. So Major General Sinona has got a very high profile position in the South African National Police Services. He testified this week that he knows Kat Matlala, they're friends, but he was not aware of any wrongdoing by Kat Matlala or any illicit affairs that he was involved with. Rumor has it, allegedly, there comes that wonderful word with the flashing lights, allegedly Mr. Sinona, or Major General Sinona, assisted Kat Matlala in getting a 360 billion contract for the from the South African police, amongst many other allegations. But during his testimony, which, like I said, didn't do him much favors, it became clear that during his tenure, and if I have my dates right, he was appointed in 20 as the head of the KwaZulu-Natal section of the Hawks. There have been 3 burglaries of a house in Port Shepstone, where the Hawks of KwaZulu-Natal store all illicit drugs, and amongst them cocaine, that was seized during operations. 3 burglaries. It now turns out that the house, there was no security whatsoever surrounding this house. The 3rd burglary, 250 million rands worth of cocaine was stolen and obviously went back into circulation in South Africa. So we are all aware, it doesn't need to be spelled out. Drugs ruin people's families, communities' lives in a very severe way. So it's quite severe to know that so many drugs went back into circulation. And now 4 years later, only 4 years later, did Major General Sinona see to it that the house was secured. My question is, why did he take so long? And it's not a question that only I was asking. The commissioners did question me about it. But it's quite clear that allegedly this Major General did severe harm to a lot of people by not executing his duties as he should have. And that's choosing my words very carefully. Like I said, allegedly. So he's my first nomination for Cupcake of the Week. Second Cupcake of the Week is a little bit different. It's very short. And I speak of only knowledge of what I saw and read in newspapers, on the internet, on YouTube, on X, on TikTok. So I wasn't on the aircraft myself. So just maybe there was certain procedures implemented that I'm not aware of. And if it is, I do apologize, but I feel quite strongly that somebody needs to say this. We all keep on saying amongst our friends, we talk about this, but very rarely do we go into the normal public arena and say these things. So I'm going to say it. I'm nominating the captain of a SAF Air aircraft that flew to East London last week. As most of you know, and most of you have seen the footage, the EFF members were flown to East London to support their esteemed leader, Uncle Juju, during his pre-sentencing trial in East London. And they were bussed in, and they also flew in. And on this one particular aircraft, and I'm going to put up a little screenshot of it right there, the EFF members decided they needed to vent their enthusiasm. Now, if you're seated in an aircraft and you sing and you're joyous, and no problem, it's not a problem at all. Shouldn't be a problem. But if you stand up and you dance up and down the aisle, it becomes a security risk. And it is actually against civil aviation law to disrupt an aircraft in such a manner. Just imagine, fire breaks out right at the back of the aircraft, and the front trolley dolly wants to get with her fire extinguisher to the back. How is she going to do that with all these people in the aisle? It's a security risk. But my nomination doesn't go to the protesters. My nomination goes to the commander of that aircraft. Sir, ma'am, if it's a ma'am, well done. Vima Power. You should have or could have done something to end this palaver. Could have turned on the seatbelt lights. If that didn't work, made an announcement. In a severe normal matter, one would assume you could have landed at an airport nearest to your location. But you cannot allow something like this to happen on an aircraft and there be no consequences. I certainly don't want to be in an aircraft where I know possible emergency situation could not be handled because of passengers' behavior. So, Captain, he or she, ma'am, sir, Cupcake of the Week nomination for you. Next nomination is a bit more serious. Not that the last one wasn't serious, but this one is a bit more serious. A bit more, in my eyes, very much so. Nomination goes to the South African Human Rights Commission. And yes, why do I nominate them? Let's go back to last week. During the protests in front of the court in East London, the EFF supporters, and it's their right, yes, absolutely, to be there and to sing and dance and protest. That's their constitutional right. However, they infringed on other people's rights, and this is where the Human Rights Commission comes in the following manner. During one of the many scenes that were filmed by the media, one person deemed it okay to make an effigy of a coffin and take a photograph of the judge of the case against Juju, Uncle Juju, and paste the photograph on the coffin. One has to ask morally whether we could actually condone such behavior. What are we teaching our children by such behavior? But it didn't stop there. At some point during their stay of these supporters of Julius Malema, they went to the beach, which is their fair right. They danced and toyed on the beach. Fair right, no problem with that. The problem came in the chanting that they were doing. Singing all sorts of songs, no problem. But you keep chanting, and here I'm not referring to the well-known Uncle Juju's chant of kill the Boer, kill the farmer. They were chanting, kill the whites. Human Rights Commission, I've not heard a peep out of you, not a sound out of you. Is human rights selective in South Africa? Does it only apply to certain people, or does it apply to everybody? Doesn't end there. Another screenshot from the protest in front of the court. Somebody fashioned a pike, took a white lady's head, obviously from a display doll, and placed it on the poke and was dancing up and down the street with this effigy of the severed head. Obviously painted in some blood as well, to just make sure that we understand that this head was severed from somebody. My question to the Human Rights Commission is, if this effigy had not been of a white person, a colored lady, or an Indian lady, but one of our other esteemed citizens of this country, would they have reacted? Or is it just they don't care and would not have reacted anyway? Either way, no matter what color this effigy was. But the message was quite clear. So Human Rights Commission, not okay. Human Rights Commission in South Africa is led not by a lawyer, by the Reverend Chris Nissen. And when I say Nissen, not the Vroom Nissen, the Nissen with an E. Sir, what are you going to do? If I look at last week, to me, it signals all the meaning and the messages of a 1993 occurrence in Germany called Kristallnacht. I think this is our Kristallnacht in South Africa. And your not condemnation is noted. So yes, a huge cupcake for you. Next nomination, it has to be our esteemed, honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa. Wimmerampis, I think you should grow some cojones, as they say in the proverbial speak. If you don't know what cojones are, please contact me, I'll explain to you. I've seen them in a long time, but I have a good memory, so I can explain to you. Why am I saying this? We all know about the Iran warships joining the war maneuvers in Simonstown and the palaver that followed. Now, Uncle Rumpis, you commander-in-chief, and the Defense Department is different from other departments. It's not a democracy. If the commander-in-chief tells you to do something, you do it. In fact, you ask, how soon, how quickly? Yes, sir, no, sir. 2 bags full, sir. And it's quite clear that either your defense minister or your generals in the defense force, or both, ignore your explicit instruction that Iran was not to partake in any of the war maneuvers. Now, I'm taken back to a incident in 1992, 1993, somewhere there about just before the transition in 1994. And the then president, and everybody's going to roll their eyes now, I know, F.V. de Klerk, his generals were not happy with the way F.V. de Klerk was handling the transition, if actually in any case, the whole transition. So what did F.V. de Klerk do? He didn't have a commission, he didn't ask questions, he simply fired them. Because you know what? He was Commander-in-Chief of the South African Defence Force. So he fired in total 8 generals. I don't know if they were major generals, I don't know. Not that clued up on the military, but they were generals nonetheless. So, Wimmerampis, take a feather out of F.V. de Klerk. I know it doesn't go down well, it's the apartheid and racism and all of that, yes, we know. But he did the right thing. He fired the generals. So, cupcake nomination again. That's 4 nominations this week. That doesn't mean that in the last 2 weeks there hasn't been an enormous amount of things happening in South Africa. Amongst other things, we declared, not we, I don't think the South Africans would do such a thing. I think it's the ANC and Durko declared the Israeli charge d'affaires as persona non grata. Obviously, Israel reciprocated. And I think in next week's cupcake nomination, that has to be one of the nominations. Also, forgot the Parliament, they gave themselves a 3.2 or 3.2% salary increase. Now, if I may remind you again, beginning of this financial year, our budget was in a deficit and the government wanted to raise VAT by 2%. Now, we didn't have the money then, we still don't have the money, but we have money for paying ministers 3.2% increase. Also, it actually does require a nomination for Cupcake of the Week, etc. I mean, it just doesn't stop. There's a momentous new year for South Africa. Anyway, enough said. Thanks for listening, and before I say goodbye, who's going to be Cupcake of the Week? I think by the seriousness of, everything is serious, but by the seriousness of what has happened last week, I think it has to be the South African Human Rights Commission and Reverend Nissan, not Vroom, Nissan with an E. So yes, Human Rights Commission, a nice pink one this week for you. All the way from Checkers, no less. Cupcake of the Week, South African Human Rights Commission. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next week again. Cheers.